God morning, God morning. How are you feeling today? I hope that you're feeling wonderful today. The sun is shining bright. We have a new beginning that we can begin anew today, right? So, let me start out by saying today's story is coming from a plethora of experiences, right? You know, there's one Father that we can always count on, and that's God. He is our real Father no matter what, right? When we look at God and we look at all the wonderful blessings that we receive each day, we have to say thank you, right? So that never hurts to pray or to meditate, because that only makes us closer to Him, right? So I wanted to begin today by speaking about how wonderful things are. Even sometimes when things seem like they're bad, they are experiences to make us stronger, right? So when I look back in time and I look at the present and I look forward to the future, I know that that's who I can count on. You know, we sometimes think we know everything that's going on, but we have no clue. God is protecting us at so many points and perspectives in our lives, and we have no idea. You know, I was looking at a little boy. There's my mother had a best friend years ago, and she had all these daughters, and she really wanted a boy. She loved her daughters, and they were beautiful. Oh my God, she was gorgeous, okay? So you already know her daughters were beautiful. But it wasn't just the beauty on the outside. It was the beauty on the inside. Like, I always looked forward to going to her house because the energy there was so vibrant, and her daughters were always happy to see us, you know, and they were always giving hugs. And I mean, it was just a really warm foundation. And you knew that these people, when you went to their home, that you were going to be welcomed. Isn't it important? That's a real important thing. When you can go to someone's home and know that you are welcome. Now, the funny thing is she was getting older in life. Her husband, and she and her husband were not together. I think he passed. And, you know, she was having a wonderful life. She didn't have to work anymore, but she still yearned for a little boy. So she decided she was going to adopt this little boy. Oh, he was beautiful, beautiful little boy. And so charismatic. He was a toddler. I remembered how beautiful the energy was, even higher at the house, because she was adopting this little boy. But you know, when you're adopting a child, there's a process. You can't just take the child home and, you know, now this is your child. The boy he'd come from a big family. It was a very, very sad story, because the mother had so many children and she could not take care of this last child. So there was an attempt to poison this child. Just knowing that this is even possible was heartbreaking. And I was a child myself. I was older than him, but I was still a child. But he was just the little boy was just so vibrant, so charismatic. He was just so sweet. You know, you look at this child and you say, how could someone want to hurt this baby, this beautiful pearl, this child, this innocent child? For some reason, excuse me, I believe the mother didn't seem to see her way out of it. She had had enough, and she just was overwhelmed. Sometimes when people are overwhelmed, they don't know what to do, and they feel like there's no way out. When there is a way out, you can always reach out for help, whether it be a friend or family member, or, you know, a crisis number. There's 800 crisis numbers. You know, you can Google it and get the number. So either way, the child was beautiful. And right before it was time for her to adopt this child, they said that the family wanted the child back. And she couldn't understand it. She said, didn't they say the child, there were attempts that the child was going to be poisoned? I don't understand. Why would they remove the child from a loving home that I have him in, or his own room, toys? I mean, she went all out. Somehow, they were going to return the child back. I guess the mother had gotten the counseling she needed or what have you, and they were returning the child back. The pain that this woman went through, I think she died of a broken heart. I'm going to be honest with you. I think she died of a broken heart. Now, I wanted to also say that one of the reasons why that child may have been removed from that house during that time was God's hand. God protecting that child from that period of time where the mother probably needed to get the necessary mental help that she needed. Either way, I don't know what happened to the child. I just know the child was removed from the home. But after that, she was never the same. She was always still loving, always still kind. But there was something missing, and it was very clear. You know, sometimes we are walking around again thinking that we know everything that's going on around us. But God knows better. He knows best. So when you are removed from a situation, or you're detained and you're late, and you're in traffic and you didn't make it to that destination in a certain period of time, it's because God was removing you from something that could have happened to work against you. Now, growing up, I'm going to tell you, I asked my father so many times if I was from the same family, because I always seemed so different. I felt so different, and so many things happened that made me feel like I was unloved. You know, so I could not understand. And of course, I was told that my mother suffered postpartum depression, so I was not able to spend my earlier years with her. And having my grandmother, I thought that was my mother, as I stated in the earlier video. So, but so many things just did not seem to add up, you know. My father, maybe because he was a young father, I don't know, he'd go to the mechanics, and, you know, I'd have to go to the bathroom. We go to the bathroom, and it was not a unisex bathroom. So men are coming in and out of the bathroom. I'm running behind him. It's so many different things that just seem so odd, you know. Being left so many times, going away to sleepaway camp, and they forgot to pick me up. Staying a whole nother day or two, you know. So many things just did not add up. You know, God protected me through all of those things, all the mishaps, always, getting lost, at times. And my father putting me on the train independently at, 8 years old, 7 years old? Sometimes parents don't always know the right thing to do, but God protects you through the whole situation. Now, I tell these stories to make sure that you know that when you have a child, you have to try to be patient and think things through, not allowing the child to go, all about, independently. Being put on the train, I had allergies. The school prepared this fish and cheese sandwich, and I wanted to try it. It looked so good, and I tasted it. And all of a sudden, my friends and everybody surrounding me's eyes got really big. They were all looking at me. I'm saying, what's the matter? One kid was pointing at me and laughing. My best friends, Geraldine and Dion, were looking at me. They were like, oh. He took me by the hand and walked me to the office. Those were my best friends, man. I tell you, I don't know if friendship could be that genuine anymore. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I know the genuine friendship that you have with God will lead you to the right friends, right? And that's one thing that we do know. You ask for guidance. But as we go, they walked me to the office, and we got to the office, and the principal said, "Who's that?" Did not even recognize me. I broke out in maps. If you touched any part of my skin, it swelled up. I mean, the allergies was serious. So they called. They could not find my father. But they contacted my step-grandmother. And she said, "Well, bring her home." You know, they didn't know what to do because they knew they didn't want to, have to worry about me. But they put me on the train because my father's directions were to put me on the train. And they got him because he could not get to the school. So he said, "Put her on the train, let her go to the shop." I was so scared on this train. On my way up the steps to get on the train, I was flashed by a man dressed very inappropriately in a car. I ran upstairs. I was crying. I got upstairs, and the person in the turnstile said, "Aren't you supposed to be in school?" And I showed them the note from the school, and he let me get on the train. He said, "I don't know if you're supposed to be out here by yourself." I got on the train, and I found my way to my step-grandmother's shop. Now, although she was my step-grandmother, she was like a real grandmother to me. Sometimes people put step and all these different labels on things. But she always made sure that we ate. And she always made sure that we were taken care of when we were in her presence. So I'm going to say shout out to Gam. That was my grandmother, okay? Just clarifying, because I know somebody might put a little stamp on here. That wasn't your real grandmother. Well, she was my grandmother to me. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. Shout out to my Gam. So anyway, as time would progress, I stayed at the shop until my father came and picked me up. I think he picked me up I think we ended up going up to the house because my father didn't pick me up till really it was late when he picked me up. And by that time, the swelling had gone down, and, I guess whatever allergy I had subsided, But, it's important that we realize that with everything that goes on, God is protecting us throughout the whole experience. Going to church, my grandparents my grandfather was a minister, my grandmother was first lady. I noticed that we'd be in church and a lot of people would be saying, hallelujah, amen, and really being really spiritual or, Christians. But once we cleared the doorway of the church, there were a lot of different things that were going on, people smoking, some of them talking, and not to be judgmental. What I'm saying is sometimes as a child, when you are not understanding what it is that you're going through and you're looking towards the adults, you're looking for guidance. You think that what they're doing is right. So if you see them doing certain things that are wrong, you see it as right because you don't know any better. And it is so important that we realize that when we are in the presence of children, we have to make better choices. Now, I'm not saying I'm a saint because, I have made my mistakes. And that's one thing I have to say. I had an Auntie Mamie growing up. And I'm going to tell you, she loved Reverend Ike. She sent her tithes and offering. If she was sick, she was still trying to get to church. And she would go to his church, and she would pray, and when I tell you, this woman, if you came to her and you spoke to her about anybody, she would say, "Stop right there. I am not going to participate in that. You chose that person, and that person is with you, and we are going to not talk about that person, okay? Because I can't judge anyone, because my life Many journeys I've suffered, and many journeys I've crossed. And I will never say I was a saint. The only saint here is God himself. And she talked to you, man, I'm telling you, she was beautiful. Anyone having a problem could go to her house and stay. Anyone. It wasn't too many people. It was usually one at a time. But, you know, I remember my brother going there and staying for a period of time. I remember my mother going to stay for a period of time. And never did she ever, even if she could not help you, she made sure she fed you. And with those types of examples from being in her home, I learned so much. And with her, I learned, or I felt as though when it comes to family members, you must forgive them and let them back in. But what I learned afterwards, through life of course, is you can love people, but sometimes you have to love them and forgive them and move to a distance. Because sometimes it can be a painful journey. Sometimes people look at you and they take your kindness for granted. You know, later on in years, there have been so many times where I have counted on a person, and honestly, I don't think that it's their fault. I think life sometimes sends us down different journeys. And when you're with that person, they might be experiencing one of those journeys. While they're experiencing that journey, you just happen to be in their circumference. You just happen to be around them. And while you're around them, they're going through their crisis or their experience, and you are there. So you get to share that experience. But under no uncertain terms are you to stay in that environment if it's an unhealthy one. So I found myself in different situations, and I've learned a great deal from those experiences. But one of the things that I have to say is God guided me through it. When I was in an environment that was very unhealthy for me, someone decided that they were going to get food prepared, and they made me a special plate. Well, when people make you a special plate, sometimes it's not exactly what you should be eating. God will have that plate knocked out of your hand. You say, wow, oops. You're upset because that food really looked good, but it wasn't for you. Sometimes you'll end up eating that food, and he'll still heal you through the process. But then he will remove you from that environment. He will say, it's time to go, and you better heed the warning. And that's what happens sometimes. You have to be very careful. Sometimes people look at you and they think that you don't know what's going on. And you might not know what's going on, but God knows better. How many times has God directly removed you from a situation? You know, there was a situation with the World Trade Center. And a child was walking towards the World Trade Center. No, he was in a stroller. His mother was pushing the stroller. And he stopped her. The boy could barely speak. And he stopped her. And he screamed, Mom, no. And because of his reaction, she knew something wasn't right. So she turned to go in the opposite direction. The child still cried and everything. But the further away she moved from that environment, going back towards the Bronx, the child calmed down. Next thing she knew, she heard an explosion behind her. As she turned away and turned around, she got to see that it was a problem with the World Trade Center. God will remove us in so many different ways. He'll use a child to help you, to let you know that it's not the right environment. He'll give you a feeling, intuition, and let you know that this is not the spot. You know, I also had a spiritual advisor years ago who used to tell me, clear your thoughts. Clear your thoughts. And I didn't understand what he was talking about at that time. Now I can get deep on this topic, but I can't go but so far. But what I will say is this. When you're thinking negative thoughts, the vibrations are picked up. And when those negative thoughts are picked up, you can send negative vibrations. That's not exactly what this earth needs right now. This earth needs healing. And don't think that your thoughts are not affecting others, because while it's affecting others, it's also affecting the earth. Now, some people might say, oh, that's crazy. It's not crazy. That is the reason why so many people are suffering now. Because when you think a thought, an action can sometimes follow that thought. You could be thinking, I want to step on that bug. You step on the bug, right? That's your action. But you thought it first, right? So if we're thinking in low vibration, actions then come soon after. And even if you're thinking it, now the person in your environment, they're being affected by that thought. Now it's hard sometimes to keep those thoughts, your vibration's so high. So here's the idea. You find high vibration in music. You find things that'll make you happy. And that's what you do. You work through those. People say, when they come on this channel, some people, they say, ain't nobody that happy. That's your thoughts, your vibrations. You have to think on a higher level, on a higher spectrum than that. So long as you're vibrating in a low circumference, you're going to find more problems. If you start vibrating, on a higher level, your whole situation changes. Part of the quantum physics, as some people would say. We have to begin to speak things into existence. If that's what you want, you should be speaking it. Don't call yourself dumb. Because when you call yourself dumb, your vibrations are now lessened. And now, you just changed your environment. The good things that are supposed to be coming to you, it takes a longer period of time for them to come to you, because look how you're thinking. Look how you're speaking. You want it? Start talking about it. You want something better? Maybe you should act on it. You want a new house? Start visiting homes. Start going to open houses. You know, one of my closest friends at the time, we used to go to open houses all the time. And I believe that I was definitely manifesting a home. But sometimes God will see through that you receive it, but it might come to you later on, because the people who are doing what they're doing, they might need to learn that lesson. And you step back so that God teaches those people, others, that lesson. And then the door opens for you soon after. You know, right now, one of the biggest things that I've been really looking at is the homelessness issue. There's a lot of people homeless. Some people are living out of their cars. Sometimes they even have their children living out of their car, and then they go to school from there. Have to get a post office box as their address. It's disappointing when we have a society that people can be ignored. You know, I was interviewing some of the homeless people more recently, and some of the stories. You know, some people are homeless, and people say, shoot, I wouldn't want to live here. But see, you don't know what they went through. One man was homeless because people robbed him, stole his identity. He became an alcoholic first, Then drugs came after. Now it's like he's circling and he can't come back from that. You have no idea what these people are going through. San Francisco, a place I used to love to visit. One of my favorite malls were there. It's no longer the same way. And some of these people who are strung out on drugs, you gotta look at that. They are strung out on drugs because that helps them to forget. It's not really helping them to forget, but that's how they feel. That's what they think. Sometimes you have to see the other person's shoes and walk in them for a minute so that you can see what they're going through, so that you can understand them. Now, I'm not saying be homeless. Nobody wants to be homeless. That person doesn't want to be homeless. But they're homeless because God might be guiding them through something right now. But while God is guiding them through that, shouldn't there be a societal law that makes sure that people have what they need? You know, I would say it again. Google had this contest. And with this contest, people were, the children were asked to redesign the Google, I guess the Google symbol, excuse me. And a child won, and they gave him, I think, a scholarship and maybe a computer, whatever it is they gave the child. It was a blessing. But in society, sometimes we could actually be looking to our youth to enter a contest to help us figure out this homelessness issue. When I presented this idea to people, a lot of times people will say, shoot, the government knows what's going on. That's his job. But we still have to pray over the situation. And I know that God's going to fix it. But sometimes while God is fixing things, maybe he's guiding us to do things as well. You know? We have a lot of people who make a certain amount of money. And a lot of different, programs where people send money. And sometimes the money doesn't always land in the hands of the needy. You know, it's really good that, that people are making sure that the children are eating. They have the fund where, where you have free lunch, free breakfast at schools. I'm going to tell you, that's really a prominent thing. Because I remember growing up, my brother and I, my stepmother used to take the kids to the mall or whatever. Sometimes she didn't want to come straight home from work. And I totally get that. Because sometimes I felt the same way. I want to hang out a little bit before I go into the house. Because when I go in the house, I'm going to lay down and rest. But I remember sometimes there was no food in that house. And my brother and I having to get changed to go down the hill. There was a factory down the hill from the house. And we give them change, and they give us a baguette, as the English call it, French call it. It was a nice, like a hero bread. And he'd take half and I'd take half, and we would eat that. There were times when we didn't even have, decent shoes and clothes to go to school. Now the problem was, the bigger picture was not really being looked at. As kids, you want to be in style. You want to keep up with the Joneses. So, other people, when school started, they got new clothes. So there were times when we did get new clothes. But when we moved to Jersey, somehow there was less money. But I noticed my younger siblings always had new shoes, new clothes for every season. Their shoes their feet are getting big, they would get shoes or what have you. Now I thought, it's really, my stepmother made sure that the children had, and I thought that was a great thing. My mother was in New York, she didn't see everything that was going on. And I didn't want to stress her out with all the stuff that she was going through, So sometimes, whatever money I got, I would go and get some Chinese slippers. But sometimes I'd be wearing Chinese slippers and a spring jacket in the wintertime. And a few kids teased me, but there was my godmother, who always saw. And although she didn't make me feel uncomfortable or what have you, she just would give me certain things to make sure that I had certain things. And that was always love in her house too. She always made sure that, you ate, very supportive, you know. God blessed me to have women, supportive women around me at different times in my life when I really needed them. There was an older woman, Mrs. Edgerton, and I used to work at the after-school program. She would really be, she'd say certain things, and you could tell that the Spirit of God was definitely surrounding her, because there's certain messages that I would get from her. And she knew, she's like, you know what? God is definitely taking care of you. Don't you worry, You didn't even have to tell her that anything was going on. She knew. Sometimes people get caught up in their own lives and they forget. They forget what it was like to be your age. Just like sometimes you might forget what it's like to be your child's age and what it is that your children might be going through. Sometimes we have to step back and pray about it and then enter the situation. Don't fight. Don't argue with the kids. Let them take a minute and you take a minute until that time comes and it progresses into that moment where you can actually have that talk. Now, I know I'm speaking about random things, but it's important because I need to make sure that these things are touched upon. You need to really be praying for this homeless issue. I went through my own qualm with being homeless myself. Where I had to literally regroup, redirect, refocus. It's a funny thing. Sometimes you feel, people assume that everything is okay. And it's okay because, everyone has to lead their own life. But when I was going through it, God guided me through it. When you say, how is that possible? When God is guiding you through something, you have to try to be the best listener. And sometimes you don't always hear what the message actually is. But sometimes it's like that Christian song, I'm running for my life. You got to go through certain crises to make you stronger. The situation is that God is holding your hand throughout the process. When you're gang stalked or people are using your identity and acting as though they are you. Try to go and you speak to the police. They want all types of proof. And sometimes the proof you provided is not enough. So you go through this period, you could have received a few inheritances and people find a way. You know that in Florida, the law is if you were married to the person, you get everything. Unless the will is found. Excuse me. Unless the will is found. The wife can say there was no will. And that's that. But somebody might just know the truth of the matter, You can leave an environment because it's not good for you. That little boy who was poisoned in the family, he was taken away from the family for that period of time. I don't know how people can get a second chance like that. But what I do know is when God is guiding you out of an environment that is unsafe, again, you don't know what's going on. You could be living in an environment, you could be living with family, and you think they love you or what have you, and they could be doing other things. I do know this. When it happened to me, God guided me out of an unsafe environment. And He removed that plate of food from in front of me. People fixing you a special plate, be very mindful of that plate. You know, I had no idea during those periods of time that God was removing me from the situation until the ascension began, when I started getting different wake-up calls through my intuition. When I tell you to go outside, some people might not want to hug a tree. Sometimes you might want to just take your shoes off and put your feet in that soil. The answers will come. But it's important that you realize that you don't know everything that's going on around you. You know, this gang stalking thing is serious. There's so many different readers on YouTube talking about it, you know. And somebody had the nerve to say I was trying to get attention when I started talking about it. Now I hope she's waking up to the fact that people don't need to come out on the internet to talk about things. When the person comes on the internet and speaks about certain things, it's really meant for you to wake up and see that things that are going on in your surroundings might not be as clear to you as you think. I'm speaking on random subjects here because I haven't been on for a period of time. You know, I had some compromises in on my phone. I had to, you know, fix certain things. But I'm thankful to God throughout the whole process, because sometimes, again, you have no idea what another person's going through. But the great thing about it, the wake-up call about it, is that God is there for you. So you might not be able to speak to anyone else, but you can always speak to Him. Okay? So that's been my word. Have a wonderful day.